Japanese free agency is always very interesting to monitor because some of the best players in the NPB decide to take their talents to Major League Baseball, and this year we could see three extremely talented players who could make immediate impact both short-term and long-term jump over from Japan to the United States. That is Munetaka Murakami, Kazuma Okamoto, and Tatsuya Imai, and today we're going to break down all three players, the best fits for their services, and predictions on where they end up going. But before we get into all of that, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to check out this YouTube channel and get updates on our next uploads. Without further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video. Let's start with Munetaka Murakami, who in 56 games this year hit .273 with a .379 on base percentage and a .663 slugging percentage. He also hit 22 home runs in just those 56 games, which is incredibly impressive on a per-rate basis. Murakami is a first baseman slash third baseman, but I do believe teams are going to view him as a first baseman only, with DH appearances being the only other area I see him fitting in a lineup. I don't think his glove can be trusted at third base. I don't think he has the range or the motion in order to play that position reliably and provide really passable defense there. But first base is where I could see him settling in as a decent and solid, reliable first baseman. Nothing crazy, but nobody that's going to make you want to claw your eyes out. Now, in terms of his offensive game, there are both pros and cons here. The pros are ridiculous raw power, with Murakami having the ability to absolutely demolish baseballs with high exit velocities and good barrel rates. He amplifies those excellent raw power numbers by having a high fly ball rate and a high pull percentage as well. Murakami pulled 47.6% of his batted balls this year and had just a 34.1% ground ball rate. So a lot of his fly balls are turning into home runs because of how often he hits them to right field, and that's something that should remain the same at the major league level, even if he doesn't make a lot of contact. When he does connect, it's explosive, and that's something that teams are completely bought in on as a thing that he can do at the big league level. The question becomes whether A, he's a platoon hitter, B, a full-time player, or C, a star in the making. There are obviously outcomes that go beyond that, but those are the three main ones that I think you can look at for Murakami and try to project his value from there. Murakami's big issue is his strikeout rate. He has struck out at least 28% of the time in each of the last 3 seasons, which you have to mind and factor that the NPB pitching world does not have as much hard-throwing guys or as quality of breaking balls as we see at the United States or Major League level. Ultimately, I think the gap in velocity with guys throwing about 2.5 miles per hour harder in the major leagues than they do in the Nippon Baseball League will present massive issues for Murakami if he doesn't make some big changes to his swing and overall approach at the plate. He's patient enough to leave pitches out of zone and not chase them, but that patience is not going to do him well if he's not able to make contact on top of that. The Yankees are a team that's often linked to Murakami, as are the Dodgers, but I don't see either team really being in on his services because as a first baseman, the Yankees have Ben Rice and the Dodgers have Freddie Freeman. Now, you might look at the Yankees and go, they can take Ben Rice and put him at catcher. Sure, but they would have a below-average defensive catcher and a below-average defensive first baseman, and that first baseman might hit .210 in his first season and strike out 40% of the time. Those are just things that I don't think the Yankees want to add, while also making their first base position significantly more expensive. A lot of contract projections have him around $80 to $100 million on his total contract. I would be very surprised if the Yankees invested that level of financial capital into first base, knowing they have some outfield issues and some pitching issues as well. For the Dodgers, Freddie Freeman is steady rock. He's an elite defender. There's no conversation about putting him anywhere other than first base, and Max Muncy is a great offensive player at third. Not a good defender, but definitely a better player than Murakami in terms of median outcomes as things stand right now. As for teams who I think are going to be in on Munetaka Murakami, you've got to look at teams that desperately need power in their lineup, not teams that already have power and don't really need to take that gamble. You also need to look at teams that either A, have a poor first base room, or B, are going to have their primary first baseman hit the market. Some of the teams I like to look at for this are the San Diego Padres, who are on the West Coast and desperately, and I truly mean desperately, need power in their lineup. They were bottom 3 in home runs and in isolated power, and their first base position had the lowest isolated power for any first base position or any first base group in all of baseball this past season. I know Ryan O'Hearn was great for them, but Ryan O'Hearn is going to be a free agent. He could end up signing elsewhere. Some other teams I like for this are the Cleveland Guardians. I know Kyle Manzardo is a first base slash DH type, but I think think that Manzardo is such a butcher there that you make him a full-time DH and you have Murakami play some first base. I think that would be a really good fit for Cleveland. Some other teams I could see that really need power. You have the Pittsburgh Pirates who really need power. I'm not sure if these central teams are going to be able to attract someone like Murakami. Maybe you see the Diamondbacks involved here, but I ultimately think the best fit, and this is the most confident one I have here, I think that Murakami ends up a San Diego Padre. The San Diego Padres have loved to be involved in the international free agent market. I think they're the perfect fit for Murakami. I think that's the best organization he could go to developmentally. That's going to give him an immediate chance to compete, and it keeps him on the West Coast. Again, I don't think that opportunity is going to exist with the Los Angeles Dodgers. I do think it will exist with the San Diego Padres. But knowing that the Dodgers and the Yankees are not teams that I imagine are in our Murakami, it does open up the door to some other interesting teams to be involved in this. I just don't really know who would, because a lot of them seem to be West Coast teams, or at least in the case of Murakami, he seems to have a West Coast preference. I'll throw the Mariners in this conversation, but I'm not entirely sure that they want to bring in Murakami over the contact-savvy hitter like Josh Naylor, who they had at first, given that Jerry Dipoto has publicly stated before that he will have concerns about strikeout rates when teams strike out too much for his liking. So don't think the Mariners will be that in. I think it'll be the Padres. Moving on to Kazuma Okamoto. Okamoto is such an interesting player because he is kind of a parallel to Munetaka Murakami. He's 4 years older, so there's not as much upside, but the floor is a lot higher because he's got good contact rates. He's a better defensive player. He's a strong defensive first baseman and a decent enough defensive third baseman to play there, at least for his first year or so in the big leagues when he's still more athletic. And in terms of raw power, it's not close to Murakami. Murakami's clearly a better raw power guy, but the raw power is still above average. This is a guy who's hit baseballs north of 112 miles per hour, and he's got the ability to pull the ball in the air to left field as a right-handed hitter, so he's maximizing that raw power. If you look at his last season in the NPB, he hit 15 home runs in 69 games with 21 doubles, a 327 average, a 416 on base, and a 598 slug as he had a 210 WRC+. It's the same WRC+ as Munetaka Murakami and a similar amount of plate appearances, which is again why it's so funny that these two will hit the market at the same time. Digging deeper into Okamoto's offensive profile, his contact rates are really good. He made contact a ton in zone. If you look at his strikeout rate, it was only 11.3% this year. You'd expect that number to go up from last year, but I do think that his strikeout rate will still be either A, average, or B, slightly better than average. I don't think he'll be a high strikeout guy in the big league level. Not saying he's going to be a contact machine, but again, I expect him to make enough contact. I expect him to be a good bat-to-ball guy. If you look at the last 3 seasons of Nippon Baseball League action, Okamoto is second in WRC plus to Kensuke Kondo, who is not coming over to the big leagues, and that WRC plus is at 178. His OPS 929, also second to Kondo, and if you want to look at home runs as well, he's got 83. That's the second most behind Munetaka Murakami. So again, really good bat-to-ball, really good power, really good hitter, really good player. I don't think he has the ceiling to be a star in the big leagues. I think that if you wanted me to bet on who I think would become a star, I would bet on Murakami, but I think that outcome is still unlikely, and I think the more likely outcome is that Okamoto is a good player, and Murakami is a platoonish kind of player. Now, in the case of Okamoto, the safer profile, the perhaps less expensive cost, the being already 29, kind of wanting to come over and probably win immediately. The versatility, he can play some first, some third, he can occasionally play left field. I think that just opens the door for suitors. There are a lot of teams that could be in on Okamoto. The Phillies, the Mets, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Blue Jays. You want to look at the Guardians again here, the Padres, the Mariners, the Astros, the Rangers. All of these teams could look and say, hey, this is a guy who either A, fits our ballpark well, or B, helps us. And that's just mostly American League teams and some National League teams sprinkled in there. Maybe the Cubs get involved. Maybe the Cardinals want some middle infield help. The Dodgers I could see in on this. The Giants, maybe the D-backs. I don't really know. There are a lot of teams that could use a versatile right-handed bat because you don't have to bring him in to play every day at one position. You can have him move around the infield because that's what he's done in Japan. Maybe he has a preference and doesn't want to do that, but you can find him 130 games on your roster playing DH, playing first base, playing third base, wherever it may be, and I think that makes him very valuable to any team, to any offense, and it's why I do see his market being pretty good. I don't think he's going to get paid $100 million, but I do think he'll get paid a decent chunk of change. And again, I think a lot of teams will be in, at least asking or calling. Okamoto's going to get his preference on where he wants to be location-wise, what situation he likes most, what organization he felt like treated him the best in terms of the meetings, and where he thinks he can be best and where he wants to be for the next 4 or 5 years. Again, I think Okamoto's going to have a pretty strong market, but I don't think he'll have the strongest market among these three. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But for some guys that I think could, or some teams who I think could be really good fits, and I'll narrow this down to 3 teams: the Boston Red Sox, the New York Mets, and the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm not going to repeat and use the Padres here. That feels a little bit cheap. And I'm going to sit here and say that I think we could look at a team like the Mets as a team that either A, pivots to Okamoto as a first baseman, or B, just brings him in to play third base and split some time at first as well. In the case of the Boston Red Sox, Tristan Casas missed the whole year with a knee injury. Obviously, he could come back and be a good player, but you might want to protect yourself from that by having Okamoto be your first baseman, giving him time at DH. You can split time with Yoshida and Casas and play some third as well if you need somebody to play there in case Bregman doesn't come back or he's hurt or whatever it may be. He can play some corner outfield in a pinch. I'm sure he can be okay playing every now and then on that Fenway wall. And if you look at the Phillies, I think there's a good need there because they could need a DH. They could need someone who can play DH. They could need someone who can play first base. And I think he's better than Alec Boehm. I think that the Phillies would be happy to move off Alec Boehm. So I like that fit too. And if you look at Philadelphia, that might be the best ballpark for a swing. That left field is not too deep, and it's also not too high of a wall like Fenway. I think he could be a really darn good hitter over out there in Philadelphia. So my prediction, I think he ends up a Boston Red Sox. I think that if you look at all these teams here, these are all teams that either A, have a first baseman, or B, should have a third baseman or first baseman. In the case of the Mets, you imagine Alonso comes back. In the case of the Red Sox, you imagine Bregman comes back. In the case of the Phillies, Harper and Boehm are already on the roster. But what gives the Red Sox the edge for me is that Bregman coming back is a lock, in my opinion, but first base isn't a lock at all. For the Mets, they have Beatty at third right now. They should be able to put Alonso at first. I think they would have to move pieces off their roster to make this make sense. For the Red Sox, it fits immediately. It fits right there. You can immediately just slot him into your roster. Whereas for the other teams, they'll have to make moves in order to do that. I think that'll matter in negotiations. I don't think Okamoto wants to come over and be a player who isn't guaranteed a starting spot somewhere. With that being said, though, let's talk about the final player on this list, and that is Tatsuya Imai. And I think he's going to have the biggest market of all 3 of these guys as a starting pitcher. Now, the right-hander had a 1.92 ERA in 24 starts with 163 and 2/3 innings pitched. He struck out 178 batters. He only walked 45, and he had a ground ball rate of 48.3%. That came with a 2.01 FIP. The numbers were just brilliant this year, and the repertoire is pretty fun. It's a 95-mile-per-hour fastball from a low arm slot. It's a pretty good splitter and a pretty good slider that moves towards right-handed batters, not away from them as a right-handed pitcher, which is a little bit weird. Curveball's in there as well. He has a quote-unquote sinker, but it's more of a changeup. At least it's described as a Vulcan change grip, and it's got the speed of a changeup, so I'm going to assume it's a changeup, not a sinker. The other thing I really like about Imai is the projectability. He's 27 years old. He'll turn 28 next May. I think there's a chance teams could have him add a sinker and a cutter, and I say an actual sinker, not the quote-unquote sinker he throws right now. Not to be insulting, but that's not really a sinker. And I think Imai is someone who is, I think teams are going to be in. The Yankees, the Dodgers, you want to slap those 2 teams, fine. Padres, Mets, Red Sox, all these teams could use them. All these contenders, Phillies, whatever it may be. All of these contenders can use Imai, unlike Okamoto and Murakami, where you could argue not every contender needs a player like that. The Dodgers don't really have a need for Okamoto. The Yankees may not really be in on him or have really a place for him to play. The Blue Jays may not really have a place for Okamoto to play, but all those teams should have a place to play for Imai. For the Dodgers, perhaps the lesser need of the 3. I think that the Yankees and Blue Jays need starters more than that team does, but those all teams could be in. I think that if you look at the best fits, and I'll put them as 3 teams. I'm not going to repeat the teams I used for the other ones. So I'm not going to use the Red Sox, and I'll keep the Mets in here because the Mets do need starting pitching. I won't put the Phillies in here. I'll put the Mets, the Blue Jays, and I guess I got to put the Padres as well. And I'm going to put the Blue Jays as a team I think he ends up going. Mets a close second for me. The Mets are a close second. I think Skubal being off the market, if he's not on the market, would change things, but I'm going to assume that it's not a 0% chance he gets traded, and I'll say that because of that, the Blue Jays are the team that woos in Imai and sells him this dream of you'll be an international star in Toronto, you'll be a star in the United States as well if you pitch well here, you'll play on a team that's got a ton of young players led by Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and you don't have to deal with the New York market. You can deal with the Toronto market way easier, way less harsh on its players. So I'd love to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think that these 3 players will be productive, impact big leaguers, or do you like my predictions for them? Again, I have Murakami to the Padres, I have Okamoto to the Red Sox, and I have Imai to the Blue Jays. So, again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.